Backseat gaming, taken from the idea of backseat driving, of someone offering unsolicited advice while driving. This is the same thing for gaming context, where people will just tell someone what to do or how to do something unprompted, and there are people who do want backseat gaming and want to help, but the issue is when nobody literally asks. Of what I've seen, hand-holding games is seen as technically something different under the claim that hand-holding is by the game itself and not by a person in the room, so it counts as backseat gaming. I in fact do, because hand-holding is the developer blatantly trying to tell you how to do something because they either don't have the confidence the player to be able to do it, or it's just scared that players will just drop the game there and then. Like, it's like tutorials. Tutorials are there to explain stuff to the player because developers can't be in the room. But if a game starts overly explaining things or flat out solving things for the player, that is the developer's backseat gaming at that point. Most times when backseat gaming happens, it's generally if someone expresses some sort of frustration with a game. Because especially with a game that someone enjoys, they don't want another person to keep playing the game and finish it. So they want to try and dissuade that person from quitting by going, oh, if I help them with this, perhaps they'll keep playing. Which again, it's if the help is unprompted. If the person didn't ask for the help, then you're just giving them the answer, which they probably were still in the middle trying to figure out for themselves and weren't actually fully fed up. But just seeing a lot of people just express any sort of frustration in the game, people start thinking the person's just already reached their limit of being fed up with the game. Or especially it's a more niche title, and more niche communities definitely want more people to engage with the game. Once again, for some people it's a case of just want to do everything in your power to get more fans into the game. So again, even if you're doing it unprompted, to them it may not seem a big deal, but to the person playing the game, it could be a huge deal. The real annoying part is when the person doesn't even get a chance to even try, and already has someone try to tell them the exact thing they need to do the moment they even get to the situation they have to solve, which is kind of pretty much the face of backseat gaming, when someone immediately just, not only just says to do things before it's even relevant, but also some cases may end up spoiling parts of the game, whether gameplay or story-wise, in the process, because of the fact of they want them to immediately know what to do. A big source of backseat gaming are in more narrative-based games, because of the fact that people, if they're watching someone play a game, let's say playing it for the first time, both people, then it could be a case of, oh, people are curious or throwing out possible suggestions or ideas or choices because they're not sure what could possibly be led to, so one suggestion of, oh, why not try doing this? And there are certain communities, everything, especially like, cause like live streaming, where some people will prefer the idea of just, we're all thinking aloud. You're not demanding to make a choice, you're just throwing out idea because you don't know either, so it's like, let's brainstorm this one entire thing. Or especially when it comes to playing that kind of game with friends and family, and they're all just commenting, throwing ideas. I think Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 3 actually had a feature that allowed audience members, specifically like this live stream chat, to essentially vote on options, but that's just a slow process. I don't think anyone really used that feature much, but it was a thing in order to try and get more input from a chat room. The big problem is when people start demanding people make certain choices in a narrative-based game, where suddenly now it's the chat room or some person now fully backseating saying you need to make this choice, or getting angry if someone makes a different choice in the game. That has happened a lot in recent times with the game Dispatch, where the game's like, hey, here's one of these two characters you have to drop from the team, and people had such a heavy bias and preference for one person at the idea that a streamer with the other option made them actively mad and acting as if they were now playing the game wrong just from making a different choice in the game. I made a video about the topic of true endings in games, and how there are some games that don't have a true ending, it's just based on whatever the player picks. But that a community will designate a true ending anyway, even if there is no actual true ending outcome, which is something that also affects how people view a game. Let's say you're playing a game like Shin Tensei 3 Nocturne, and you don't do the Labyrinth of Amala, you're not interested. There are people who will say and yell at you that you need to go back because you're playing the game wrong by not going after the fiends, not getting the menorahs, not getting all the stuff when it comes to actually trying to finish the game in that certain way. Or, wait, why aren't you doing this to interact with Dante because he's locked to the contents of Labyrinth of Amala, or playing a remaster, also Raidou. But a person can just be disinterested and not care for that, since also Nocturne wasn't designed with that originally, so it's bonus content they don't have to do. But there are people who are like, you're not doing the bonus content, and why are you playing this version of the video game? Or because official media references that aspect where like, oh, SMT5 has a Demi-Fiend DLC, and it's referred to Return to the Demon King, even though it's not actually, that's actually not anything actually called, or True Demon King, that's not what it's actually called, it's just called Labyrinth of Amala ending, but fans associate that pathway as True Demon, and so the official media, when it comes to Atlas West, are like, oh, let's refer to it as Return of the True Demon, even though, once again, that's just a fan thing and not an actual official thing. Persona 5 Royal, it has a true ending, and then an extra epilogue for the royal content. The royal content is not actually needed for the true ending in any way, shape, or form, since the true ending is just that of the base game. The royal content is just an extra epilogue that's so separated from everything else, pretty much doesn't even matter much to the overall narrative. But there are people who will swear by it that you have to do that content and that you're playing the game wrong if you're not doing it, or if you just go for the game's base true ending with no extra epilogue whatsoever, or if you go for the bad ending in Royal Story, because the Royal Epilogue does have two endings, and the game treats both of them on a similar playing field where getting either one, the game treats it as you have completed the video game, it is now over, onward New Game Plus if you want. But since people associate, the one that gives you a new final boss as the canonical outcome, there are people who will get mad if someone just picks the bad ending and calls it a day, or will judge you heavily. Hell, to the point where someone mutual with on Twitter decided on their own accord, because I did not make them do this whatsoever and they can't pin it on me, decided on their own accord to make essentially an experimental tweet treating it as if they had just finished Persona 5 Royal for the first time, got the Royal bad ending, and called it a day, with the responses from people constantly mentioning how they've made the wrong decision and they need to go back right now. Mind you, in this situation, a person could have saved over their file and not have the file to go back to the Royal Story without redoing the entire game. But people were like, you have messed up today here, even if the game itself treats it as you have technically beaten the game and you're done with it. Which is a weird case when a game actually does that kind of thing where the trophy procs no matter what you do for the finale, so long as you reach the credits. So it's one of those cases where, is it the fault of the player or is it the fault of the game for treating both these outcomes as the same thing, even if one outcome leads to the actual more proper conclusion to the game. Final Fantasy VIII, its main way of playing with the junction system, means there's many ways for people to actually play the game because of different GFs they junction to their characters, or just different spells they also just junction to the characters as well in order to make their more unique loadout. This can also lead to some players being frustrated if they don't really find good combinations or good spells to routinely get in order to junction it to their abilities, or maybe there's someone who may end up being paranoid about using magic. Some people end up relying on GFs. It's just a fact of how the combat works. There's a lot of different roads people can take in order to play the game. However, when someone generally faces dissatisfaction with Final Fantasy VIII's gameplay, And often response from people is to immediately just start telling them to just play Triple Triad or to follow a specific guide and basically backseat what they do in order to tell them how to essentially break the game from as early as Disc 1. And it's like, once again, I see her trying to be helpful, gets to want to finish Final Fantasy VIII, but essentially handing them the keys to how to break the game, which still requires a lot of effort, by the way, isn't exactly the best solution, because you're just basically yelling at them saying you're playing the game wrong, here, do this, and now you'll be set for life. It's up there with people who have found some sort of meta in a game and essentially try to prevent that as the correct way to play, and then basically try to backseat anyone who's not doing that. Like, I've even seen that in one case of an article written about job system in games, and bashed Final Fantasy V's use of jobs, claiming that, oh, because in Final Fantasy V you can hypothetically max out 3 specific jobs and your characters will have the max stats in the entire game, that means everything else is pointless as a result. And it's like, are you high with the way you view a job system? And think that any other option is now worthless and that people are wasting their time actually trying to synergize abilities, combine job abilities, synergize entire characters with their abilities and whatnot. Raidou Remaster Mystery of the Soulless Army got flack because of how much backseating the character Goto now does in that game, with Goto essentially telling Raidou the solution to puzzles throughout the entire game, even being self-aware about it, can make a joke about the idea of, why is Goto telling all the answers to the Devil Summoner? Kind of one entire thing, so they're fully aware of it, but it got flack because you're still doing it. You make a joke, you're self-aware about it, you're still telling the player exactly what needs to be done and how to do it. Even down to the fact where the game will auto-select the demon whose ability you have in order to tell you which demon ability you need to use on the NPC in order to get certain information to progress. They later updated the game so you could turn this off, making it closer to the PS2 original, but it's still a weird case where the developers know that Goto is doing all the brain work, and they still just decide, keep it like that. VIII Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword would originally comment a lot more about certain aspects of the game, giving you advice, basically backseating the player on certain aspects, whether it be low battery, low health, percentage of boss health, and stuff like that. That's like, I get you're trying to be helpful, V, but I got this. So, when they remastered the game for Switch, they actually toned down how often V would talk, on top of the fact of now it is optional for the player to actually get her advice. So now, V is a more welcome thing of, I'm not sure, let me hit this button, and now I can ask V for advice, rather than V coming out of the sword over and over in order to backseat me what's going on. Although, strangely enough, I've seen people try to take this issue and label it also towards Navi of Ocarina of Time, even though Navi isn't doing that anywhere near as much. And once again, Navi is a case of you, the player, asking Navi the information as opposed to being asked information. And let's play the 3DS version, in which case Navi will unprompted tell you when to take breaks from the game because the company does not want you to cause eye strain playing over the 3D on the 3DS, but their play limit they have is like, you've been playing for 1 hour, don't you want to take a break? Nintendo, shut up. Omochao in the Sonic series. Do I want to focus on Sonic Adventure 2 because that's where Omochao's help is kind of unavoidable. Where I'm not sure if it's just die once and multiple times, Omochao will come up to chime in, try to give the player advice. The issue being the advice Omochao gives you tends to be not very helpful, and the fact that it's now flying around, whirling around you, giving the advice means you can't even outrun it. I mean, you can't damage or grab Omochao out of the air, so there is that, but it's still one of those things where Omochao is trying to backseat you simply because you made some mistakes, and now he just won't go away for a bit as he gets a message. Some of his messages are also rather pointless, like telling you get hit by a falling meteor, it will hurt.
Be careful, falling meteorites. If you get hit, it'll hurt.
Thanks, Omochao. but in later release of some generations, you can completely turn off Omochao if you do not wear some Omochao assistance, so they later learned to just not have Omochao be as forceful to the player in telling them what to do. God of War Ragnarok, I know, is an infamous case where the characters constantly give the player the answer to puzzles, not just give them tips, flat out will tell them what to do with the puzzles after a short amount of time has passed, straight up having all the characters basically just backseat Kratos to a certain degree. Something that there's also a video by IGN where even Atreus' VA mentioned how even they find it annoying when they're trying to play the game, and they're now hearing their own voice tell them what to do with the puzzle, which is a very interesting predicament to be in. Having to hear yourself spoil the puzzle to you.
Is it fun having you giving the answers to the puzzles?
What if you used your axe on it? I think we need to get that wheel moving. If you freeze the geyser, the pressure will turn the wheel.
Actually, for me, no, because I'm trying to do the puzzles and I hear myself.
But I am aware they did later update the game in order to turn that off as well. So, it's an issue that, once again, funny that it was there, when it really should have always been the option of turning it off from the get-go, but at least they later gave the option to turn that off, at least from what I read. Big kind of choice that leads to so much backseating is any game that has a morality system, because so many people want to be the hero and know pretty much about other people do the good pathway, and if they don't, they'll question what is wrong with them, so to try and backseat what morality choice they make in a game. Especially if it's something like the Undertale fanbase, which will flat out demand what order you play the game in, having an order that they're like, you have to play in this order specifically. It's like, let people live. Maybe they don't want to go for those endings, they just want to do one ending. Maybe they just want to do none of the endings and call it a day. Why is it gotta be a freaking play order as if y'all freaking wrote the script on how someone is supposed to play Undertale? One of the features on the PlayStation 5 was the Game Help feature, which was originally a PlayStation Plus only option, but the whole idea was that developers can opt in to essentially add tips or guides in order to help players get certain stuff in their game, whether it be main progress or optional stuff. But like I said, originally it was a feature you need to pay a subscription service for, which I ain't doing that. And two, the developers had to opt into the feature. They had to add in the tips themselves, meaning many games just don't have that feature whatsoever. Years later, when they removed the restriction on the PS Plus, they also made it to where fans can have their own clips used in order to help guide new players with stuff in the game. My issue when it comes to Game Help is the fact that it's very hit or miss. Like, you have some instances where, let's say, Persona 3 Reload, you have an official Game Help from Atlus, but all it does is just tell you the weakness of Twilight boss fights. Doesn't tell you any strategies, doesn't tell you what moves they have, doesn't even tell you about full moon boss fights, or social linking, anything else. It just blatantly tells you the weaknesses and resistances of Twilight boss fights, which in Persona 3 is the most worthless thing to tell somebody because the game's navigators in that game already scanned for that. So there's no reason to make that some big tip of, here's this big tip, something you would already know if you just had a navigator do their job. I mentioned how they added a feature for players to add their own clips, but it also means that stuff being shown can either be just not that great or helpful, like Song of Stellar Blade that's like, hey, get this trophy, and it's just do the most basic thing because there's not really anything you really do for it, or a trophy for beating this boss. It's just them beating this boss, not giving any actual tips, not them trying to tell you, hey, here's some tax to avoid, stuff like that. No, it's just straight footage of them fighting the boss. That's about it, which can be helpful to see what someone else who did it correctly is doing, but still doesn't help you all that much when it comes to a tips idea, at least not for me. And I saw some for Astrobot, which is detailing every bot you can find, although because it's community-made clips, it also means it kept in stuff that someone should edit it out, such as how often the player is pausing the game, making it seem that the player is pausing the game so they too can check a guide to then make this guide for you. And it's one of those things where, okay, they should have edited that out, but that's on PlayStation because they're the ones who automatically take the footage. The players don't have to actually submit footage, they just give PlayStation the right to be able to take the footage and turn it into a community tip. I just want to ramble about when it comes to backseating. And I know for the most part people think of backseat gaming and think of the negative aspects of everything and how people are actively trying to ruin their enjoyment. But I have seen people make comments that as much as there are many instances where, when it comes to like live streaming, a viewer may end up forgetting the streamer is a human, the streamer can also forget the viewer is also a human, because there are instances where someone could generally not spoil anything, just make a helpful comment, but because they're in a sea of other people who aren't trying to be helpful and are more demanding, they end up getting treated the same as those other people. I mean, it's to the point where people just refer to our chat room as chat, to the point where some people joke that basically the chat's a hive mind. I mean, if no, it's a bunch of individuals being viewers to the stream. I saw one person put it as, if someone's trying to be helpful and gave a tip within a chat room, it would look way more hostile than if they were the same person was giving the advice IRL, where they'll probably get treated as more friendly because then you remember this person as a human being and not just some random name on a screen. I also want to bring up how some people welcome backseating, or some people play games with friends that basically invite the idea of backseating, just want to turn the game, even a single player game, into just way more of a social event where it's about all the friends having their input, usually like a choice-based game, and what they think they should go across. Or how there are some games with multiple characters, like, I know when it came to Detroit Become Human, that was a game where people often play with their friends and have each of them control one of the characters, so that way they can have this more social experience where each one are making their own choices. Even if they don't agree with it, they gotta deal with the consequences when they get back to the character that they are playing as. I know for some, recounting games themselves, they're hand-holdy as being backseat gaming, because to me it's still the same idea. It's the fact that coming from the game itself is basically the developers doing it. But I know some wouldn't count, like I mentioned to some people, and they're like, not the same thing to them. But to me, once again, anything in a game like that is developers trying to tell you something directly. So go out there, play games, whether you get backseat or not. Or whether you need backseating, like I would never beat in Dark Souls 1 if I didn't get backseated on where to go, because I just don't know where to go in a Souls game. And I know it's gonna sound mean, but based on like some people play certain games, they need advice given to them. Just because you give advice to someone doesn't mean they'll actually do it, or any way, shape, or form obligated to do it. But I just know the frustration seeing someone fail something over and over due to their own mistake, not realizing their own mistake, and then blame the game for it, even though it was their own mistake. Like I said about the topic, alright then, good day.